I'm honored to be here with Mr. Tony Robbins, a world-famous entrepreneur, author, and peak performance strategist, as well as Mr. Tom Zgainer, the CEO of America's Best 401k, with 30 years of experience working with both small and large businesses to provide retirement plan and benefit solutions. They are on a mission to disrupt the 401k industry that is plagued by high fees and unnecessary risk. And I'd like to just get into a little pitch and catch with you here, Tony, and start by making it clear to our audience that you're often improperly described as a motivational speaker, and the reality is that you're a man of strategy and action, and you like to measure behavioral changes, and you like to measure results. You've helped scores of CEOs, professional athletes, politicians, and each one of those people has difficult challenges, and you've helped them find a strategy for a solution. And I think at this particular moment in time, it would be worthwhile to ask, have you ever considered running for president?
You're so kind. No, but I've had the privilege of working with people on both sides of the aisle.
Yes.
In fact, I voted for President Obama the first time. Quite frankly, I didn't do the second time. He and I had quite an interesting interaction.
Good.
And I ended up coaching the person who, Mr. Romney, who for his first debate, unfortunately, was out of the country for his second and third and fourth debates.
Right.
I like to work with anybody I possibly can to make a difference. Kind request. With Donald Trump out there running, I think we all have an option if we wanted to.
Yeah, I think he's a very.
People are tired of traditional politicians. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, and that's why I think you would be a natural choice. When a high-profile client seeks your counsel, is that a difficult conversation initially? I mean, do you have to discuss the fee with them? Does somebody else handle that? Are there people that come to you that want counsel and you think, geez, I'm not sure if I can help this person?
Well, I don't want to sound flippant, but, everybody has their expertise, and I'm sure as a doctor with the decades of experience that you have, it wouldn't be overconfident because you've done it so much. You've probably seen just about everything that can be seen. So I worked in 100 countries, and I've worked with people from every walk of life, 50 million people to give you an idea.
Right.
And so at this point, I could truly be an idiot, and I'd have to see that there are patterns that cause us to succeed or fail, whether it's make us depressed or angry or upset, or make us passionate and alive, whether it's being successful in our business or in financial terms, or whether it's finding ourselves having too much money at the end of the money. They're ongoing patterns. And because I live in a day and age where, you can travel anywhere in the world and meet millions of people in person and through online communications, when you've got 50 million people, at some point you could be totally dumb and you'd have to see there are patterns. And once you know what they are, it's relatively easy to change. So I don't run into, knock on wood, I haven't lost a suicide, for example, out of thousands in 38 years.
Right.
Someday maybe I will, but I haven't so far. We make films, we follow people 5 years later, so that's just an extreme. But I get the call when the athlete is burning down on national television. Serena, for example, Williams, and I got to turn her around, and I do it successfully. If I built reputation, or all the way back to the days, of like the 1984 Olympics, where I helped a gentleman who wasn't going to make it, and he won the gold medal and gave me enormous credit for it, or an Andre Agassi way back in those days.
Right.
I get the phone call when the President of the United States calls me, true story, and says, President Clinton, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do?
Yeah.
My first response is, could you have called me sooner?
Yeah.
It's like, come on, it's tomorrow morning, right? But I figured out tools that can help people make those changes. And it's not because I'm so smart. It's because I have this belief that success leaves clues. That anyone who's successful in anything, in a relationship, in business, as a doctor, as a parent, as an intimate lover, they aren't lucky. There are patterns. There are things they're doing. And if you uncover what they're doing, you can compress decades into days. And that's really my passion, is really helping people to close the gap between where they are and where they really want to be, deserve to be, whether it be professionally or personally.
And it's well known that when you prepare for a presentation, the first thing you look at is to know your audience and their deepest needs, desires, and concerns. And you have an audience of dental professionals coming up this week at CAC 30, and I want to know, what have you been thinking about as you're preparing to present to that group?
Well, it's interesting. Whenever I go to a meeting, I have a meeting in advance with people from the industry, and I like to meet with people that are considered to be some of the best. And I know they've organized a group that I'm going to sit down with in advance and dig in, because I really believe that life is found in the dance between what we desire most and what we fear most.
Okay.
And what I've spent my lifetime doing is showing people how to break through those concerns, those, as achievers. Most dentists, most doctors are achievers, right? We've worked our tails off. You've educated yourself. You add massive value. So we may not like to use the word fear, but we have concerns. We have things that stress us. I always say to people, if you follow a trail of stress, I'll find your deepest fear. And once we can deal with that fear, now we can just unleash you into what it is you really want and how to close the gap. My focus with them is going to be two lessons. It's like, how do you create an extraordinary quality of life? I'm sure you know the impact on dentists as a profession in terms of their own physical health, emotional and physical. They deal with the stress of patients at such a high level that their quality of life is not consistent with the level of value they provide people. So my focus is going to be, how do you do two things? How do you have that greater quality of life? How do you achieve more of what you want? In other words, how do you close the gap between where you are and where you want to be? How do you take what you dream about and make it real? It's kind of the science of achievement, if you will.
Okay.
But then the second part is the art of fulfillment. Because, we had a huge loss, I think, in our culture here in the United States about a little more than a year ago when we lost Robin Williams. I mean, here's a guy that was incredibly successful. He wanted to, make people laugh all around the world. He did it. He wanted to be a movie star. He did it. He wanted to win an Academy Award. He did it. He wanted a beautiful family. He did it. He wanted millions of people to love him. He did it. And he killed himself.
Yeah.
So as important as it is to have your achievements, it's probably equally, if not more important, to master the second lesson of life, which is really, how do I experience the meaning that I want? How do I experience the fulfillment? I always tell people, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. So I'm going to show people the best of what I've learned, and I'm going to customize it, as I always do, for the specific concerns and desires that people in this industry have. But the truth is, everybody here, whether it be a dentist or his staff or her staff, they're going to find themselves in a position where we also have these common things that everybody has as human beings. So I'll be able to use some of the universal patterns and also adapt to some of the specific needs I find that people have.
And do you have any, as a dental patient, do you have any memorable dental experiences? What is your point of view as a dental patient?
Well, I used to have a large space between my teeth, and I got them bonded at one point. I was an obsessive person that wouldn't even take aspirin, so I did all of these dental procedures in the very beginning with nothing, just using my brain, which was quite painful, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But finding a dentist that really could talk to me and connect with me personally and say, hey, Tony, I understand what you're doing, but here's how it's going to do less damage to your body and be so stressed out while you're doing it.
Right.
The first breakthrough. And then some of the new technologies that are available. I don't just mean lasers, but I also mean things like NewComb, which is a great product that I know a lot of dentists use today. I think about 500,000 patients have used it.
Yeah.
That takes the stress out of the doctor, and he doesn't have to, give somebody something that they might be a little bit drowsy with later on. There's liability to that. So I have no stock in the company, but I find it to be a really valuable tool. I think a lot of people avoiding the dentist. I have a NewComb unit that I just use personally for a meditative device. It's extraordinary for stimulating the alpha part of the brain. And to be able to provide some of these new tools that make things painless and effortless both for the doctor and the patient, I think are really useful. And they're inexpensive tools for a doctor or dentist to be able to utilize to make a difference, in my opinion. That's
awesome. I want to touch on the Anthony Robbins Foundation, your foundation, which has the headline on your website that says, "The secret to living is giving." And starting when you received a meal from an anonymous donor at Thanksgiving time when you were a child, you have grown this into an organization that literally feeds millions of people every holiday season around the world every year. And I want to try to tie this into the book that you released not too long ago, Money, Master the Game, 7 Simple Steps to Financial Freedom. Can you talk a little bit about the connection there?
Well, sure. I mean, I grew up in a very poor environment financially and, unfortunately, more importantly, emotionally. I had 4 different fathers. I had a mom that was, loved me, but was an alcoholic and a prescription drug abuser. So she was very physically abusive. And so she abused her husbands. I had 4 different fathers, and they all were people that had difficulty mastering the financial part of their life. They just didn't do it. So when I was 11 years old, we had no money and no food, and it was Thanksgiving, and we wouldn't starve. We'd get food within a day or two, but we weren't going to have a meal that day. And it's just exaggerated, as you know, because everybody else is celebrating,
yes.
This great sense of abundance. And the thing that changed my life was a knock on the door, and this man came to the door. I opened the door. My dad and mom were arguing, saying things that, once you say them, you can't ever take them back. You can imagine the kinds of conversations,
right.
long conversations, the nicest word I can use for it. And this man is standing there holding this huge set of bags of food, and there was a box on the ground and a black pot with a uncooked turkey in it. And he said, "Is your father here?" And I said, "Just one moment." I went to get my dad. I was so excited. And long story short, my father got very angry. You know, we don't accept charity, and tried to slam the door in the man's face. And he said, "Listen, I'm just a delivery guy. Somebody knows you're having a tough time, and, you know, all families do, and this is a gift for you." And he wouldn't take it. He started slamming the door again, and the gentleman was a tall guy, and he put his foot by the door and his shoulder by the door. I'll never forget it. He looked at my father really intensely and said, "Don't let your ego make your family suffer." And he pointed right at me.
Wow.
And I thought my dad was going to punch him, but he had no way out. So he took the food, slammed the door, slammed it on the table. And what it did for me is my father, I didn't understand it, but for me, my focus was, holy shit, there's food, what a concept. But the thing that changed my life was that strangers care. I mean, that's what I got out of that. Strangers actually care about me and my family. So it made me want to care about strangers. So when I was 17, I swore at that time I was 11, someday I'd do this for others. So when I was 17, I fed 2 families. I found church and found some families that were in need, and it moved me so much. The next year I said I'm going to double it, 4 and 8, and within 10 years I was feeding 1 million people. In the last 7 years, my foundation feeds 2 million, and I match it with 2 million, my wife and I. But when I wrote this book, Money Master the Game, became a one-time New York Times bestseller. I interviewed 50 of the most intelligent, brilliant minds in the financial world. These are people that are self-made billionaires that started with nothing, just like the majority of us.
Right.
They've just mastered this area of life. They see it as a game. And so I said, I want to take what they have and teach it, and I put it in this book, and it became a worldwide #1 bestseller. But along the way, I couldn't help but see the contrast that, you know, we just cut food stamps, or what we used to call food stamps in this country, by $6 billion, which is like every family out there that's being helped by the government to survive has to go without one meal a month, 12 months out of the year.
Yeah.
I said, this is crazy. So I went to Feeding America, which is the #1 hunger relief organization in the United States. They're pretty amazing. And I said, look, if I donated all the profits of this book in advance and all the money I'm receiving from anything in advance, how many people can I feed? And they said 10 million. I thought, well, I've fed 42 million people in my life. What if I fed 50 million people this year?
Wow.
And I became more inspired, so eventually I just wrote a check on top of the book. And we've now fed this year, I gave 50 million plus matching funds, so we've fed 87 million people so far this year. We're going to hit our 100 million mark this year alone. So I'm pretty passionate about that. If you're going to do well in life, you know, if you have that privilege comes about because you're a good steward.
Right.
You've done something that ongoingly support. So it's one of my deepest passions, and I'm really excited to see how it's grown.
I think that's phenomenal. And when you're coaching, you know, all these various high-profile people, do you find that that's something you really have to work on with some of them in terms of coaching them to the benefits of giving and helping them see how that can help them?
Well, I always find talking about something is, you know, like a belief is a poor substitute for an experience.
Yeah.
So what I do with people in my events is I give people experiences. Once you have experience, you never forget it. You know,
Yep.
The reason I still have these silly little fire walks or wood breaking or skydiving or other things that I do at times, I do them because you just never forget them. And
Right.
so, you know, you can know what it's like to give, or you can know what China's like in your head, a belief about it. But if you go to China, you have a different experience. So what I do with the people I coach, I get them to do something. I say, I want you to do this one time. If you never do it again, I'm totally okay.
Right.
But you take somebody out there and you have them go deliver food, and you go as the delivery person. You don't let them know you're the actual person there. You wear a T-shirt, jeans, and you surprise somebody with food for a family that doesn't have food.
Yeah.
The impact of that psychologically and emotionally on anybody who does it, it's forever. I get people to take their kids. You know, my kids started doing this when they're 6 and 7 years old with me, and one of them at 5. And I mean, to this day, they're addicted to the experience of giving. And I really believe, you know, there's nothing that'll ever match. You know, you can buy yourself things all you want, and
Right.
It's a wonderful gift. It's wonderful to have those choices. And I certainly have great economic freedom in my life, which I'm grateful for. But, you know, buying my mom a house at the early stage of my life and surprising her, making her think it was for me on the beach,
Wow.
and her telling me, you got to get it, handing her the keys, to this day, there's nothing I could ever buy myself that come close. There's nothing I've done that I can say economically. I have the privilege of a global express jet. I can go anywhere in the world. I got some really unique privileges. None of that comes close to handing those keys to my mother.
Yeah.
You know, and watching the shock and the tears in her eyes. So I really tell people, if you think money doesn't matter, you don't know who to shop for. You're just shopping for yourself.
Right.
You know, and for me to go feed 100 million people this year, blows my brain wide open. It makes me more excited than any little financial goal I've ever gotten for myself. And I don't think I'm unique in that way. It sounds like bullshit to somebody who hasn't done it, but if you experience it,
it's huge.
You'll realize that every one of us wants to be more than a taker. We want to be a giver. When you really are, it lights you up like nothing else on earth. But to do that, you have to take care of yourself. You have to do well. And I think one of the challenges for most doctors, dentists specifically, and their staffs, is they're so incredible as caregivers, they don't take care of themselves, and they get burnt out.
Yep.
And I think that, part of what I really want to do is make sure that their financial future is laid out, which is why I wrote this book, because in 2008, I was watching people all over the world, my billionaire clients, as well as my barber,
Yeah.
Just these extreme people, everyone was affected.
Suffering.
And it's going to happen again. I mean, we haven't changed the core of what's going on, so I want to turn people from being the chess piece into the chess player. And the subject seems so complex, but it's really simple. And the place you got to start, quite frankly, and the reason Tom and I are partners, is because I realized as I did this, the level of abuse in the system is insane. And where the largest abuse is, where you can have the most impact for your staff, if you're a doctor, and for yourself, is, listen, the only way you grow and get financially free is by compounding. But there are compounded costs, and there's compounding and taxing. So other than your home, your 401k is, for most people, the foundation to their financial freedom.
Absolutely.
And it's a system that has a level of abuse that is completely insane. So I've been on a mission to disrupt that industry. And I was on the cover with Jack Bogle, who created Vanguard, as the two of us seeing as partners, and it's really Tom and I as partners, to go out there and disrupt the system. And we're doing a good job, and we're about to blast it off. I'm glad to see President Obama's, whether you like him politically or not, whether you're a liberal or conservative, at least he's trying to make it so that people can't hide the fees that they're charging you and have to put you first. Now, that'll get watered down. It has every time, unfortunately. But that's part of what I'm going to do on day 2 at the dental conference. I'm going to have a second session that's about how do you create financial independence, and it's for doctors and for their staff.
Oh, and I think that's phenomenal. I mean, I'm a big proponent of if I have a 401k plan for my staff, and, having staff members that are relatively low wage earners, they're making $15, $20, $30 an hour, and helping them to really get into that mode of saving, I think is, as dentists, I think it's our responsibility. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of dental practices out there that don't provide retirement for their staff, and I think that's a shame. I want to ask...
But what's interesting? What's really interesting? You're a conscious doctor who's caring about your staff in spite of how busy you are and being an editor and all the things you're doing. I'm quite impressed, by the way. But I'm not just blowing smoke. You're pretty awesome.
Thank you.
The problem is there's an industry that you are playing their game. You are a chess piece in their game. And here's what this industry's done. It's been around for 3 decades. It's $4.4 trillion with a T. When you get to trillions, the numbers are so large, people don't even know what they are. And the abuse in that system is insane. Imagine being in an industry. You're a dentist. Imagine if you're in an industry where there was zero regulation, where you didn't have to tell people what you charged them in the last 30 years. Only 3 years ago, for the first time, Tom, for the first time in 2012, they had legally to tell you what they were charging you for managing your money. And see, since people don't understand what it means, they don't know that these supposedly small fees compound, and that 1% in fees, just 1% takes away 10 years of your retirement income. And these fees can be 3%, to give you an idea. So you can have 2 people having the same investment, and they can save the same amount of money. One got nothing really at the end. The other one is in really, really great shape. I mean, it is a world that is, if you can imagine a world, just try to imagine a place where you take people's money and you don't tell them what you're taking. So here's what they did 3 years ago. These big insurance companies and paycheck companies, 18 out of the 20 biggest providers are insurance companies or paycheck companies. That's what they do. They now they display the fees over 35 or 40-page disclosure with the most confusing language that I know people that have a PhD in economics that don't know how to decipher the language that's in this process. So what Tom and I did, Tom said, look, we're going to have America's best 401k. What would that be? Well, the first thing you'd have to get people to understand is that fees matter. When you interview people, and there's polls have been done by AARP and the polls have been done in the general population, depending which poll you read, 61 to 65% of people think they're paying no fees in their 401k. So someone else is making billions and billions of dollars thinking no fees. So let me give you what Tom and I's mantras are. The first mantra on this, because I really want the dentists to understand this for themselves, because it could be the difference between being financially free or working for a lifetime and still struggling financially at a later stage of life. The first thing you got to know is fees matter, and you are paying them, so you better know what they are.
Right.
And so Tom and I sat down and said, let's help educate people. First, we got to teach people. Every 1% is 10 years of money that's gone for you. Doesn't matter what the investment was. That's where it is. So here's an example for you. If you take two people, and let's say by the age of 35, they've accumulated, let's say, a doctor maybe $100,000, and they just keep that money in the market, in average, the market's return of 8% over the next 30 years, so they're 65 years old. The person that paid 3% in fees, which is so common it's sickening, the average managed fund, according to Fortune magazine, is 3.1%. But the person paid 3% in fees versus the person paid 1% in fees, here's the difference for you. The person paid 1% in fees, that $100,000 will go to $761,000. Pretty nice, $750,000.
Yeah.
The person paid 3% in fees, who also got the same return, same 8% return, only has $432,000.
Wow.
That's 76% less money for the same investment, for the same savings, for the same return. But here's what's even worse. The person who is paying 3% in fees is going to run out of money 21 years earlier. They're going to be out of money at 74. The person who paid 1% in fees, they're going to have money when they're 95 still. So, I mean, people don't understand what the impact is of this process. And so what we do is we provide people a free way, and we're going to do it right at the event, a free way for anybody who's there to go and see what is your current 401k, what is it really costing? What's the real fee structure for it? Now, what's really interesting about this is you think, okay, well, if I can just get my fees small, or most people think their fees are like 1%. The beautiful thing is I brought Tom into my company when I started doing this research. He had America's Best 401k, and I said, prove it. Show me.
Yeah.
He said, I'll do a full analysis for you. He did the analysis. Well, I was paying, what was it, Tom? Was it what was the total number? You remember?
You were close to a little over 1.80% all in that we could see, that we could really get a grasp on.
And so that's management fees on the mutual funds themselves, as well as the fee paid to the fiduciary or the advisor?
Tony's plan was through an insurance company.
Okay.
And because of that, you have the layers. You have the layers that are paying the record keeper, that are paying the fund company, that are paying the broker, right, that are paying the broker-dealer. So all these haircuts are involved. And so you might start out with a base expense ratio of a fund, not so bad.
Right.
But it's akin to going and saying, I had salad for lunch today. The foundation sounds good, something healthy.
Yeah.
But you failed to mention to your wife that you put on every topping and it ended up at 4,500 calories.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's the problem with these plans. It's the other layers that at the end of the day, they've decided to feed themselves first, and you're the loser as a result.
For my organization, the savings for my company, for my employees, are about $5 million. This is just in one of my little education companies.
Wow.
$5 million back in their pockets, and we have access to all the same investments. There's no change. It's just coming from an organization. What Obama's trying to do is trying to say you have to be a fiduciary. You have to put the interest of your client ahead of yourself. Right now, all they have to do is say it's suitable. And people don't understand that difference. You want to go have suitable sex, you want a suitable meal, or you want something that's extraordinary.
Well, I love the video of the butcher and the dietitian. Was a great
Yeah, you know the story. So it's like, you go to the butcher, he's going to sell you meat. The dietitian is required to give you what you really need. They're not here to sell you something. And unfortunately, you got great doctors out there, great dentists, great staff, all trusting like crazy, thinking they're doing the right thing, and they're cutting 10, 20, 30 years of income from themselves where they could get the same return. They don't have to take huge risks. That's the difference. So the fees matter. And here's what's really crazy. It's not just the fees, because what happens on top of that is the funds matter. Like, at this point in the world we live in, what would you want for your funds? If you're going to put your money aside, you're not a professional investor. You want someone to bring you the best performing funds, and fees matter because they compound. So you'd say, I want them at the lowest possible cost.
Right.
Well, virtually nobody provides that. What they provide is actively managed funds. And actively managed funds are people trying to beat the market, and they charge enormous fees. Like I told you, an average of 3.1% just on the fund itself. But Warren Buffett, who I interviewed, David Swenson is the greatest institutional investor in the world. He took Yale from $1 billion to $24 billion over 3 decades.
Wow.
Jack Bogle at Vanguard. All of them show statistically 96% of all active mutual funds, just 90% of mutual funds, 98% of mutual funds, fail to match the market over any 10-year period of time. So you're paying 3.1%, which is 30 years of income that you could have had, right, if you kept that money for yourself,
right,
to get something that underperforms. Now, some people say, I'm smart. I'm going to find the 4% that outperform. Well, the 4% that outperform are constantly changing. They don't do it consistently. And, do you play blackjack?
I have.
Well, if people listening, if they play blackjack, or they know it's called 21 for some people, right? So
right.
If you get 2 face cards which are worth 20, your goal is to go to 21 and not go over. If you get 2 face cards and your inner idiot says, "Hit me," you have an 8% chance of getting an ace. You've got a 4% chance of getting an active mutual fund that'll match the market.
Right.
And here's what's crazy: you can get an index fund if you aren't in your traditional 401k, which you want because of tax protection. But you can get, let's say, for example, Vanguard 500 for 5 basis points. That's 0.5, not 1%, 0.5%.
Right.
But you'll go out to these funds and these companies, and they'll say, well, we can't provide this for you, because you don't have a large, so what they say almost every dentist, you don't have a large enough 401k. So because I chose to be in an industry where I individually help people or working with a doctor, I'm going to be penalized. I don't have those choices. It's the most absurd thing in the world. So some of them now, a few of them, because of people like Jack Bogle screaming, provide like Vanguard like this.
Right.
Then they charge additional fees in the red tape of 1% to 3%. The other day, we analyzed thousands of people's fees, right? Because people submit them every single day online to us. And so one of the things we found the other day is one particular firm that they decided to do their own version of the S&P 500 index, which is like Vanguard.
Oh, okay.
And they charge 65 basis points instead of 5, so 1,200% more. So imagine this. Imagine you go buy a Honda Accord for $20,000,
yeah,
or your neighbor pays $350,000 for the exact Honda Accord. That's what people are doing, and they don't even know it. And then they charge 3% on top of it of an additional sales load.
Oh, my gosh.
We're talking about a level of abuse
That's insane.
for somebody who thinks they're doing the right thing for themselves. So it's not enough, and they got great terms. Tom, what was the term we were looking at the other day in that contract? A couple of those terms they're using to hide the fees. What were they called? Do you remember?
Yeah, you'll see an AMC charge, asset management charge,
okay,
or CAC,
made up.
CAC charge, contract asset charge, contract administrative charge. What essentially means is, and a lot of your peers have had plans like this through a couple of insurance companies. They'll say, well, we have Vanguard funds in our lineup, just like you. Why do we want to switch? And I'll say, doctor, let's look at your fee disclosure. Let's look at one column over, okay? CAC charge of 1.2%. So like my statement earlier, they took a Vanguard fund with an expense ratio of 0.10 and just added 1.2 on top of it, completely mitigating the reasons for having it in the first place, but to ensure that they get paid first. It's literally criminal.
And when you're doing this plan fee checker, how are you sorting out the true extent of the fees that somebody's paying? I mean, it sounds like the complexity of each one of these plans that a 401k could be invested in are so deep that you can't even find the fees sometimes.
Well, to Tony's point earlier, 3 years ago, 2 documents became public.
Okay.
A 408B2, which is an employer fee disclosure report, and the participant gets a version called a 404A5. These really, if I look at it as, I'm not much different than a dentist at this point, or a doctor. Mm-hmm. This is giving me the optics. It's giving me the optics to look in and do the diagnosis. Because I can tell you, to Tony's point earlier, 35, 40, 50 pages, you cannot self-diagnose.
Right.
A plan sponsor, a business owner, as astute as they might be, as qualified they might be in the lane they in their profession, whatever it might be, they cannot articulate these documents. It could be a word and, or may, could throw out the complexity in the outcome of a 30-page document. So we have to, even every time we do a side-by-side comparison, we're being extraordinarily thorough, line by line, because these providers are so adept at throwing in a word here and there that can change an outcome. And so we double it and triple it, and then we show them the results. And it's kind of to Tony's point earlier where He's taking people where they are and where they want to go. We're at a point of showing them where they are and where they're heading and not knowing where they're going. And that's a different thing, right? Because they don't know, they have no idea of their outcome now.
Right.
We're just showing them a perspective. And as a result, by profession, more dentists have requested proposals from us in the last 8 months after reading Tony's book than any other profession.
I was going to say, there's one more piece, though, before you interrupt, Jared, I want to just plant the seed on for Tom doing the interview. Tom, there's one more piece that matters, too. We said the fees matter and the funds matter.
Right.
Now try this one on. Protection matters. All of these doctors do not understand, 99% of them. I sure didn't understand, and I'm a sophisticated guy with 12 different companies, right?
Right.
So I do almost $5 billion, a little more than $5 billion in revenue between my companies. I had no clue that in every one of my companies where I have a 401k, which all of them have, because I want to make sure my team is taken care of,
yeah.
I am the fiduciary. I am legally, as the owner, automatically the fiduciary. That means I have the legal responsibility to make sure that the funds they're getting do not have excessive fees. And 3 years ago, the Department of Labor came up with a new rule that says every year, every single year, you as the fiduciary, you as the owner, you as the dentist, in your spare freaking time, are supposed to go out and benchmark your 401k, which will scare the hell out of anybody who hears this,
Yep.
against all the others. And if you don't do it and you're audited, interestingly enough, last year they published the figures in 2014, 75% of those audited were out of compliance, and the average penalty was $600,000.
Wow.
For something you didn't even know you're responsible for. So what we do is we have people go online. It takes them literally 30 seconds. Our average savings is 57%, to give you an idea, for anybody who does it.
Wow.
For a small business, it's usually about $5 million back in the pockets of the owner, and meaning the doctor and their patients over time, over the history of the plan, to give you an idea. But they do it, and we do the analysis for them. And if they want to change, they can change to ours, and there's no cost to change. They just flip to ours. And if they don't want to change, they put that, and they're safe. And if they're ever audited, they're totally protected. Like at the conference, people can do it before or at the conference. If they decide to do this analysis, which costs them nothing, we also give them one of my books so they're kind of guided in what to do with their own economics to be able to move forward. But that protection matters. And when we do that, you are no longer the fiduciary. If you decide to come with us, and again, it costs you nothing to convert, then we become the legal fiduciary. So you never have to worry about being in a position of, did I provide the best cost? Am I protecting my people? Is this appropriate? I mean, just to finish up, to give you a sense, because I know we're running out of time, I'm sure that's why she's jumping on because we have other interviews, but I want to answer any of the questions you have. But just to give you a sense, Tom started this company. This guy's 30 years in this business. I love this. He's my brother. And the reason he's my brother is he's honest as the day is long, and he said, look, let's go revolutionize this. If you were going to truly not just have a name called America's Best 401k, but you really were, what would you do? The first thing you do is you get the highest performing possible funds possible at the lowest possible fee. You would make certain that you protected the owners as the fiduciary, so they didn't have to do that, and you'd make sure that everything was totally transparent, a one-page, itemized cost, no hidden fees.
Right.
People know exactly where it was, and you can show them the impact. And that's really why we're disrupting the industry and why we're so excited to serve so many different professions, but specifically dentists. I don't even know of it, but Fortune Practice Management is a company I helped to start 25 years ago, and they're one of the top people that basically support dentists in growing their businesses and also taking care of their personal lives around the country.
So do the 401k investment options in this plan, are most of them index funds then?
Yes, they're passive because, and the reason is, as I said, I did the research on this book for 4 years.
Yeah.
The greatest investors on earth. Warren Buffett has a bet right now with a giant hedge fund that's been going on for almost 10 years, and he's dusting them. I don't know the final numbers. I haven't looked at it in the last 6 months, but he was up I think it was 18%, and they were like making 3% returns.
Right.
And so he's winning the bet after 10 years because there is no economic example of active funds winning over a 10-year period. You might see it in 1 year. Like a figure came out last week, another analysis, that in 1 year, 80% of them were less than the index funds, 80%.
Yeah.
But over a 10-year period, it's always 96%. And that doesn't leave out one more thing. It's called survivor bias. The survivor bias I learned from David Swenson. He said, Tony, it's worse than 96%. Only not even 4% are actually beating it. I said, what do you mean? He said, Tony, here's what the funds do. They start 5 funds with 5 different approaches. They try to shoot the lights out at all 5. One of them works, because law of averages. They get rid of the other 4 funds, and they promote the one that works. Can you imagine if you could just go invest everywhere, take all your losers, get rid of them, and say,
right.
Look, I'm Warren Buffett? That's how the industry works right now.
I've got 2 really quick ones. One for Tom first. Tom, many dentists have the ability to maximize their contributions to their 401k every year. Once they've maximized the contribution to their 401k, where would you recommend they go next with any money they want to invest for retirement?
Sure. Well, the first is that we have an option to do something called a cash balance plan, which is a form of defined benefit plan.
Okay.
And when you start getting beyond age 45, these plans give you the opportunity to essentially squeeze 20 years of retirement savings into 10. We're talking getting another $165,000, $180,000 on top of $53,000 or $59,000 you're putting away in your complete 401k profit-sharing plan.
Awesome.
So that's usually the best place to pivot when the option exists that we try to explore.
Okay. And then, Tony, 2 really quick ones here for you. The new Los Angeles Major League Soccer team is blessed to call you one of their owners. Is ownership in a sports team more of a business decision for you or more of a way to support a sport you love?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a sport that I've come to love because I have kids and grandkids that love the sport.
Beautiful.
So the answer is I only do things I'm passionate about. And it's a sport that's, for millennial generation, they've grown up with it. And so I love that. And I love sports, period. I work with so many athletes. But I also got into it because in Los Angeles, you have the Lakers and the Clippers, right? You got the Dodgers and you got, across the way the Anaheim, the Angels, I should say. So there's, you've got these teams, the Ducks and obviously the Kings.
Right.
There's only one team in soccer, and I had a chance to partner with some people that are dear friends of mine that are some of the most brilliant people in business. One owns the LA Dodgers, and he also owns now took them from the cellar 3 years ago to the now championship Golden State Warriors, Peter Gruber. And I got a chance to work with him, and so I get a chance to participate and learn, and I'm excited about the community. We're going to build a stadium in downtown Los Angeles, so it'll be second to none.
So
it's a very exciting project.
And what was the last book you read?
Oh my gosh! I just 2 days ago was reading The Innovators, which is this book that it's by the same gentleman that wrote this book on Steve Jobs, Isaacson.
Oh, okay.
And he's describing the history of the tech business and describing specifically the things that create the combination of psychology, timing, and the personalities that have actually changed the world through technology. It's actually a brilliant book. He's a brilliant author, by the way.
Yes, I read the Steve Jobs book. I'll look for The Innovators then. Well, Tom and Tony, thank you very much for your time. I know we're out of time. I've got more questions, but I know we've got to move on. I want to thank you both so much. It's really been an honor to spend this time with you both on the phone. And I hope you have a great time at CEREC 30.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks,
Take
Tom.
care.
Thank you, Tony. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.